Stephanie. So I'm going to welcome Stephanie Wright, who's a former University of Washington data librarian and now an open science advocate at the Mozilla Science Lab, where she leads the development of the open data training program. She works with researchers, students, nonprofit organizations, librarians, and citizen scientists to help them learn, teach, and advocate for open science. So, and Sarah and I were talking about potential people that we'd like to open up the session. We were particularly excited about Steph. She visited us right as we were ramping up our data management program, and she talked a lot about how her data management program was built with thousands of cups of coffee, which we really love. So I'm going to hand over the speaking to Stephanie Wright. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Jason. I'm going to go through these slides really quick and get to my deck. Oh, there's Jason. Everybody say hi. Okay, so as Jason mentioned, I was formerly at the University of Washington. I'm now at the Mozilla Science Lab, and I've been asked to speak to you today about data advocacy. And when I'm talking about data advocacy, I will be talking to you about advocating externally to people outside your institution and the profession, as well as internally. So internally meaning inside the profession as well as inside your institution. And before I get any further, I want to make sure, can everybody hear me okay? If you can't hear me, please let me know in the chat box. Okay. Awesome. All right, I'm going to go forward. So the first question I want to get out of the way is what is Mozilla? Because usually when you say Mozilla, people automatically think Firefox. And I want to make clear that there's actually two sides to Mozilla. There's the corporate side where Firefox is developed, with which everybody is usually familiar. And then there's the foundation side. Now the foundation side, what most people don't know is that the foundation side owns the corporation side, which is fantastic because then the mission of the Mozilla Foundation actually drives the production of Firefox. And the foundation side is where I sit, the Science Lab sits, and it's comprised of paid employees, volunteers, and we're all pursuing a mission to ensure that the internet is a global public resource that is open and accessible to all. So what do I do for them? I work on the Science Lab team as the Open Data Training Lead, and currently I'm leading development of curriculum around open data, which includes training for practitioners as well as developing training for trainers in this area. And as Jason mentioned, I was formerly at University of Washington, where I was the atmospheric sciences librarian, I was an assessment librarian, and also the data services coordinator at UW. And I think for a short period of time, I was actually all three. And I think the success of our program at the University of Washington, as well as the Mozilla Science Lab, is really built on community building. And research data services support is definitely not a one-person show, even though I know there are many people that have programs that are led by one person or even a half-time person. But even though that's the case where you're paid for that part-time position or that one full-time position, it's really about the community around it. So I'm going to start talking about externally. So external relations with faculty and researchers outside the library and possibly outside your institution. So I was the first data librarian at the University of Washington, and my position there came about because there was a library committee that was formed to determine the need for research data services support across the campuses. And as part of that committee work, we did an environmental scan looking at what was being done inside the libraries, what was being done across campus, and even a bit of what was being done outside the University of Washington. And there was a report that came out of that, and a couple of the recommendations from that report included hiring a data librarian, so me, and then also development of a data services team, which was a group of people from different parts, across different parts of the library. So we had technical services staff, we had IT people, we had a GIS librarian, a business librarian, just to name a few. Now, even though we'd done the environmental scan and taken a look at what was going on, I still wasn't entirely sure exactly what our constituents wanted or needed, whether they knew it or not. And so this is where my favorite Jessamine West quote comes into play. When people have an information need, they'll always ask people they know before they ask a librarian. And the trick is making sure that librarians are some of the people they know. So I knew full well that people from the University of Washington weren't going to come flooding into the library just because we started a data services program and say, I need your help. I was going to have to go to them. So this is where it gets into what Jason was talking about, where I drank a whole lot of coffee. One thing I learned really early on is that when you call people and say, hey, you know, I'm starting this new program, I'd really like to talk more with you, can we set up a meeting? People are always too busy for a meeting. I was getting pushed out weeks, months, told, oh no, too much travel, not enough time for a meeting. However, when you change the question to, hey, I'd really like to take you to coffee and talk, everybody's ready for coffee. So I did a lot of coffee meetings. In the first year, these are the groups that I reached out to and had coffee conversations with. As you can tell from the names of these organizations, these are the groups within the University of Washington. You might have similar sounding groups at your institution. They might be completely differently named, but you can see from these names that we had people from health sciences, arts and humanities, social sciences, science. In these conversations, I would come prepared with questions that I wanted answers to, but I really tried to let these people do most of the talking because it was a fact-finding mission. I wanted to know what their issues were. And by making this a meeting over coffee instead of a formal meeting, it transformed the conversation into a casual one, less formal, non-threatening. And it let me present this as I'm looking to identify gaps. I'm looking to try to help you. I am not trying to take over what you're doing. At the end of each meeting, and these meetings lasted, I think the shortest one was 30 minutes. The longest one was 2 hours. 2 hours from someone who didn't have time to meet. And at the end of each meeting, I would ask, who else should I be talking to? Because I knew from our environmental scan who we thought in the libraries was doing work in the data management area. But if you really want to know what's going on across your campus, you really need to talk to the researchers, and they will tell you who's doing stuff. So this really helped expand my network. These conversations were also crucial in helping me frame survey questions so that I could do a broader assessment of what was needed and wanted across campus, because meeting everybody on campus was not possible. I just couldn't handle that much caffeine anyway. So I worked with the data services team, and we developed a survey. And we contacted our office-sponsored programs and asked them to provide to us a list of PIs and co-PIs from across all 3 campuses that had been awarded grants between the years 2010 and 2012. So we just wanted 2 years worth of information. The resulting list ended up being just shy of 3,200 people. We kept the survey nice and short. It was only 14 questions. And of that pool of just shy of 3,200, we had 323 valid responses. Now I realize that's just a little bit over a 10% response rate, but I didn't really care about the response rate. I really was interested in the numbers and making sure that I had a lot of valuable feedback from people across campus. The last question of my survey very much like the last question in my coffee meetings, was my ask. So would you be willing to participate in a follow-up interview? Of those 323 responses, over 100 people agreed to be interviewed. This list of 100 people that were willing to talk to us became our list of champions, and I use this for so many things. Now, interviews are time-consuming, not only to perform, but also to analyze later. So we only interviewed 16 people, but we cherry-picked who we were going to interview and made sure that we had them from the different broad disciplinary categories, such as humanities and sciences. More importantly, I used that list of 100 for more coffee. And through building those relationships, I got invited to departmental meetings. I was invited to new working groups. I was invited to participate in new grant projects with a focus on data. Basically asked to participate in all kinds of events. One event that I'd really like to mention is that our Center for the Study of Demography and Ecology invited us to participate in a summit that they pulled together where they invited people from the city of Seattle and researchers from the University of Washington to come together so that the researchers from UW could identify what data they would like to see from the city to answer some of their own research questions, and the people from Seattle were invited to talk about what questions they would like answers to with their data. So there was this wonderful symbiotic relationship that was created through this summit that brought together the educational institution with local government. These relationships that I built through these coffee talks and through the survey still exists today. In fact, just last week I was in Berkeley because I was invited by the UW Science Institute to participate in a new NSF project called Big Data Innovation Hubs. So these relationships are still going on. They're not one-shot deals. Now I'm going to go aside for just a second. Just give me one slide where I'm going to put my assessment librarian hat on and talk about tips for doing any kinds of assessment to identify needs of your users, because that's really important. The key to doing assessment is to respect the time and effort of your users in everything that you do. They are basically providing you free information. So before you go out and do your own assessment, I wish I had a poll question here and I could see you raise your hand. How many of you have received a survey within the last 3 months even? I'm sure there are a ton of you. Thank you, Vicki. It happens all the time, and it gets to be frustrating, and it creates something called survey fatigue, where users get really sick and tired of answering all these surveys. So before you go out and do your own assessment, I've provided a link here, top one on the top tip here, that is a bibliography that we put together as part of the Data One Community Engagement and Outreach Working Group of assessments that have been done on research data management needs. So please take a look there and see if you can get the information that you need from there rather than trying to survey your own constituents. I realize that we have a lot of different organizations represented here, but there are going to be a lot of similarities across organizations that you can probably get from existing assessments. If you do your own survey, remember that they are a lot of work, especially to be done correctly. So plan ahead of time for how much time it'll take not only to conduct the survey, but to write up the results afterwards. I'm also going to recommend something I didn't do and wish I did. Put it in your calendar, a date, come up with a deadline, and then tell somebody, hopefully someone you're accountable to, what that deadline is, so that you don't keep pushing further down your priority list the requirement to write up those results. In everything you do, make sure you're not wasting your participants' time. Keep your survey short. Please do not ask questions for something that you can get the answers another way, like if you can get it through observation or through statistics. Only ask questions that give you actionable intel. Keep in mind the purpose of your survey and how each question will address that goal. I know it's really popular to get a lot of demographics about your users, asking questions about gender and geography. But if you're not actually going to change your practices or do anything with that information, don't ask the question. Finally, share what you learned. And I'm not just talking about with your admin or with your library colleagues. Share it back to your participants. Tell them how you acted on the feedback that they provide you. Again, I mentioned survey fatigue and how many surveys people take. People are much more likely to provide you feedback and help you in the future if you show them how you did something with what they provided you before. All right, taking my assessment hat back off. Now I'd like to bring it a little closer to home and talk about more internal relations. It's still outreach though, because I'm going to be talking about how to do data advocacy and collaborate with people outside your institutional library or your institution. And I'm going to talk about this before I talk about working with people inside your library, because this was actually easier. We've all done this. I did the usual stuff. I presented at conferences and participated in working groups, workshops, wrote publications, even worked with a group of people in our region. We created our own little grassroots organization called the Pacific Northwest Data Curators. It's either data curators or data managers, and we meet once a year to share our experiences and look for opportunities to collaborate. There was a lot of uptake and interest and attendance at these events. These were things that people chose to go to and chose to participate in. They already had a built-in interest or they wouldn't have come. One thing I do want to say, a lot of people get nervous about writing publications or doing the conference presentations on providing data services. Please don't. People want to know. Get rid of that imposter syndrome that we all seem to have. People want to know what your experiences are. Please share them. The other thing I'm going to mention is at the end of this slide deck, I have a resources slide. And on that slide, resource number 3 is a webliography. It's really hard for me to say. And in that webliography, there's a data organizations heading, which talks about the different organizations that are already doing work in this area. Please go take a look at that. Join them, participate in their listservs, have conversations, do collaborations. That was one of the best things I ever did. Okay, InReach. This is where it's a little more complicated. I've been a part of many conversations where people are struggling with bringing their colleagues from inside their library on board and participating in data management support services. It's scary. People are overloaded. They already have a lot on their plates. They don't want to take on another thing. I get it. And while I was at the University of Washington, we tried a lot of different types of events to increase interest and knowledge and skills. We did some informal things. We did brown bags, data cafes. The person in the picture there is Jenny Mullenberg, my colleague at the University of Washington. She would hold monthly meetings on a particular topic, completely casual, where librarians are invited to come, sit down, eat lunch, and talk about a particular theme. We did formal events, data services forums. We did workshops. We invited speakers. With the assistance of the Greater Western Library Alliance, we were able to invite Jake Carlson to come and do a workshop on the Data Curation Profiles project. It was fantastic. With the exception of a couple of those events, attendance always tended to be pretty low. Yes, there are a lot of factors, the timing of the events, time of year, that sort of thing. The best attendance happened when someone from libraries administration, it was usually our associate dean, would send out a message to all the library staff encouraging them to attend. This support from administration is crucial. I see your question, Erin, and I'll get to you in just a second. Support from administration lends authority to the "this is an important part of what we do" type of message. So a data cafe. The data cafe was what I was mentioning there, where Jenny Mullenberg would have a theme that she would broadcast and say, okay, this month we're going to be talking about data repositories or sharing your data or metadata, whatever subject she wanted to talk about that month, and then would invite librarians to come and talk over lunch in just an informal, casual setting where they could ask questions and she would provide information, could share resources. So we called it a data cafe. And it was actually an idea that we borrowed from Eugene Barsky from University of British Columbia. We tried different messages with our colleagues. We started out with a "don't worry, we know this is scary and this is new and you're overloaded. If you have questions about data management, just ask us. We will help you." Another message we tried was, hey, data is just another format of information, just like other formats of information with which you're already familiar. While these messages, I think, helped to ease the fear and concern over being asked to do data management tasks, it did not increase engagement. And that was really what we were looking for. So if I had to do it over, I would have done actually exactly what I did when I was reaching out to external users. I think my mistake was believing that, hey, these are librarian colleagues, we're all trying to share as much information as we can, without understanding that I needed to make this relevant to them, just like I was trying to make it relevant to the researchers on campus. So building relationships first is, I think, key. Now, I know that you all probably think, oh, I know my colleagues. I already have relationships. Yes, but your relationships probably aren't around data support services. So have those one-on-one conversations. Build that understanding first. And as I understand it, that's something that they've started doing after I've left, and I will leave it to the University of Washington folks on this call to address that later if they'd like. Okay, so how has my outreach and advocacy changed since I started working with Mozilla? Wow, I have a whole new understanding of what it means to be open and what the reach of data is outside the educational institution. So one thing I need to mention is that Mozilla, and particularly in the Mozilla Science Lab, our focus is on open data, not just data management. Data management is a piece of it, but we really are encouraging open data, open science, working openly. And in that respect, we eat our own fox food, which is the Mozilla way of saying we practice what we preach. So we work openly in open platforms such as GitHub, Google Docs, public Etherpads. I have multiple repositories on GitHub. If you want to know what I'm doing on any given day, you can go to my repository called My Brain, and in there I have my work log, and you can see what I've been working on at any given point in time. And it is so much easier to collaborate and build a community when you see what everyone's been doing. And this is key because Mozilla is a global organization. And because we're global, we've had to become creative in our methods of working together. We have distributed teams, which means building and maintaining relationships a lot in the virtual realm as well as face-to-face. So if you look at this slide on the left, that was our team meeting in December. A lot of it happens over video, and there's some hilarity and nuttiness that ensues. There in the middle at the top, you see a screenshot from the Mozilla Science Lab Global Sprint. This is one of our creative ways to build community and collaborate across the world. We do this every year, and ours the Global Sprint for 2016 is actually coming up June 2nd and 3rd. We have over 30 sites, so basically just people around the world who have agreed to host a place where anybody can come and sit down and for 2 days hack on various projects in open platforms. Basically what happens is somebody submits a project, and anybody can submit a project and have it listed on our website that's available to work on. I've submitted our open data curriculum, so if anybody is interested in helping me build this open data curriculum, it's there in GitHub and will be available for hacking during the Global Sprint. I won't get too far into the details, but this is basically how we get everybody working together on projects to help move people along. The bottom picture, that's a screenshot from my point of view from a class or a lecture I gave to Michigan State University. They were all sitting in East Lansing while I was sitting in Seattle. And a lot of my collaboration happens over social media. So you can see a tweet there where I managed to corral somebody to collect data success stories for me. It has really broadened my view of collaboration. The Mozilla Foundation hosts every year an event called MozFest. I am not mentioning this so that everybody will go out and have a monstrous event with hundreds of people coming. But just to give you an idea of thinking outside the box in terms of who you collaborate with, one of the best sessions, I think, from MozFest last year was when we had developers from Minecraft holding a sprint hackathon with a bunch of kids. So basically we had these 2 developers at the front of the room. We had these kids sitting around computers and a table all telling these Minecraft developers what they needed to do to improve Minecraft. And some of the suggestions were actually implemented at MozFest. It was pretty incredible to see. I've had to broaden, as I mentioned, my idea of who my audience is. So it's outside academia and researchers, and now also includes government data reporters, data providers, NGOs working with citizens to use that governmental data, citizen scientists. Yes, the person, your neighbor down the street might be interested in cancer data for very personal reasons. So it has changed how I think about collaborating and how I work with other people and how I try to engage them in participation. It requires thinking about the language we use. In library land and academia, we're very fond of acronyms and specific words to mean what we're trying to say. When you are trying to reach a broader audience and expand into new areas, you can't do that. So on that resource slide that's at the end of this slide deck, I've placed a link to our jargon busting exercise. And let me tell you, the first time I did that exercise, it was very eye-opening. When you are working with a broader audience, you have to more explicitly address why what you're advocating for is important. And you have to address people's concerns and fears. Also on that resource slide, there is a link to something that we designed called Open Data Challenges. And it's basically the reasons that we hear from different people in the open data arena on why they don't want to participate in open data best practices, why they can't participate, why they're afraid to participate, and then also responses to those challenges. I have had to learn to take my librarian hat off because as a librarian, I had this belief that things need to be a certain way in order to be done correctly. So in terms of instead of saying, hey, if you want your data to be reusable, you need these 20 metadata fields, I had to learn to make it as easy as possible and not create more barriers for the people that I'm trying to get connected and engaged. So I took that 20 metadata fields and I condensed it into 5 questions that people need to answer about their data, which seemed like a much smaller ask, even though I'm still getting the same information. Another thing I learned from Mozilla is how to make things fun and interesting. Now, working at an institution, you might be thinking, oh, my researchers, they're serious. If I don't act professionally, they won't get engaged. And I can tell you that is not the case. When I was at MozFest, we had hundreds of researchers and academics there, and they were wearing fox ears and engaging in games and dressing up for our photo booth. Try to think creatively about how to make this more than just a talking head engagement. One of the things we did, you see a screenshot there of my name tag from MozFest. We gave everybody a short DNA sequence, and they had to find somebody else at MozFest that had either the same DNA sequence or a complement. And they would come to our floor, which was up on the 9th floor, so they had to go all the way to the top of the building to be entered into a raffle. So it just kind of engaged them in a different way. And then finally, we bring in lots of real-life examples. In our open data curriculum that we're designing right now, we have primers on different aspects of open data. And instead of using these primers as an opportunity to say, well, you should be doing this because it makes your research more reproducible, that's one way to do it. But what we're also doing is adding real-life examples of, hey, look, this is what these people did in this real-life situation. This is how they did it, and this was the result. One thing that hasn't changed, still coffee. At Mozilla, at MozFest, it's a 2-day event, and we have free coffee carts throughout the event. We just kind of kicked it up a notch where on the science floor we asked people, how do you take your coffee, and collected some data reported back at the end. So just to kind of recap what I've talked about, there are many ways to do community building. I have really only touched on a few. There's so much more tips and tricks I could share. At Mozilla, we've actually created a 2-day workshop on open leadership, community building, and working openly. Some of the key points that you probably should take away from this is, number one, please identify the needs of your users from their perspective, not your perspective. And this is true for both external collaborations and community building and internal. Building relationships requires a personal touch. Look for every opportunity to expand your network. I probably don't need to say that, but one thing I want to mention is for every time you have a communication, be prepared with an ask, whether it's an ask for a new connection, an ask for more information to be sent to you or provided to you, for an ask which is a help on a project, something so that it cements that relationship going forward, so that the conversation isn't really the end of the conversation. It's great to have a network where you're at the center and you have all these points radiating out from you that you're connected with, but to have a real network that expands and grows and can actually become a community, you need to connect those champions with each other, not just with you. And then finally, don't try to do it all at once. We've all got a lot of work. This is a process, and to do it right, it takes time, one coffee meeting at a time. So I've thrown a lot of information at you. I hope it's generated some ideas, hopefully some questions that we can talk about for how you can build your own communities. This is the resources page, and I'll go back here in a second. This is the resources page I mentioned. It will be part of this slide deck. This slide deck will be made available openly. At Mozilla Science Lab, we're all about being open, so all our educational resources are maintained in GitHub. At the bottom of this slide, I've included a link to our friendly introduction to GitHub workshop, which you can do a lot of the exercises online. One of our fellows created this, and we're actually in the process of tightening this up and making this something of value and interest to people who aren't coders, because GitHub is so much more than just about developing code. It's a project management system and a system for working collaboratively. So with that, I'm going to go back to this slide and leave that up and open the floor so you can talk to me instead of me doing all the talking.
Those of you with, this is Jason, those of you with microphones, feel free to unmute and speak. You can also ask in the chat.
Looks like Drexel has their hand raised. Oh.
Mm-hmm.
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me? I had put in the chat just when you were talking about at University of Washington that you were putting a lot of effort into getting your library colleagues on board with the program and coming up with some resistance or lack of engagement. But can you say a little bit more about what specific role you are asking library staff to take on?
That's a really good question, and I think that also was part of our or part of my failure in that I wasn't coming up with a clear ask. And before I continue, can I ask you to mute because I keep hearing my voice coming back to me, sorry. So that does get right back to my point. Have a clear ask. Know what you're asking for. What I was hoping for was engagement from them in helping provide data management planning consultations to their users, fielding data reference questions from their users. I don't think I made that clear, and I think I'll stop there. Do you want me to expand on that at all? And you're muted still, just to remind you. Okay. Yeah, that was a me problem and how I went about doing it. That wasn't my colleagues. That was absolutely me. Exactly. Set clear expectations. Let's see, we have a question from Iowa State. Interested in knowing who instigated taking on research data at University of Washington. There were a whole lot of things going on. When we first started this, our Dean of Libraries, Betsy Wilson, was collaborating with other organizations and other people on campus with the NSF. It was a big data grant back in the 2010s. Is anyone here from, folks from the University of Washington, can anyone remember what that was called? Data One came out of that. Something out of Johns Hopkins came out of that. So we already had some awareness of the data issue. And then our associate dean was the one that put together the committee to look at what the data management needs were across campus, the one that did the environmental scan that I mentioned. And then it was based off the report from that committee where we decided to build a data services program, that it was a need and that the library was the logical place for it. We're centralized, we were discipline agnostic, and we actually had a lot of trust and faith from our community. Did that answer your question, Megan? Yeah. It did originate from the administration. And I want to be clear, that was the library's administration. Oh, Sarah, the 5 questions you asked to help people describe their data. This is going to sound really silly, and you can, I will provide a link. Let's see if I can, 1 second here. Let me grab the link and I'll put it in there. The 5 questions, believe it or not, are actually who, what, where, when, and why. Or sorry, who, what, where, when, and how. But at the link that I just put into the chat, you will see that we expand on that, but we make it sound like it's really simple. It's just 5 questions, who, what, who, where, when, how, but there are sub-questions to that, which actually gets out the information that's needed. But if you tell people, oh, you need to answer these 20 things about your data, you're going to shut them down. But if you say, oh, it's just 5 questions, they'll be much more likely to respond. What time of year did you send out the survey? We sent the survey out in spring or fall. Uh-oh. UW, who can help me with this? I'm trying to remember. No, we pilot tested it in the spring and we sent it out in the fall. We are on a quarter system, so we did look very carefully. We have 9 weeks. We looked very carefully at how the academic calendar would be impacted. So we kind of skipped the first few weeks while people were settling in. We tried to avoid holidays towards the end of the quarter and finals and midterms. Thank you, UW. We started the survey review in November 2012. So yes, it was right there in the middle of fall quarter. How easy was it for you to get the list of PIs and co-PIs? It was a piece of cake. I emailed Office of Sponsored Programs first, and they said, contact these people, they'll give you a list. I emailed them, and I think within a week I had my list. Of course, it helps if they have the means to provide that list readily available. And Office of Sponsored Programs was willing to help us on that because they understood the relevance and value in doing this survey. So we were fortunate there as well. How do you make the case to researchers that they should care about managing their data and that the library is a good partner for those efforts? Oh boy, that's a big question. A lot of ways. So it really comes down to, this is where those coffee conversations really helped, because it was a lot of me listening rather than talking. And because I talked to people from different disciplines and I also had that survey data, I found out what their pain points were. And if they have pain points, if you're willing to help, they will be supportive of your efforts. Everyone is looking for help, anything to make their lives easier. As far as the case that the library is a good partner for those efforts, a couple things about that. Number one, if nobody else is being willing to provide that assistance, and the library is, you're going to be taken up on your offer. Secondly, for those reasons that I mentioned, in that the library is discipline agnostic, we already manage information, and again, that message of data is just another information format. Does that answer your question? I could talk for hours on how to go about doing this, really. I would also take a look at the Open Data Challenges list sheet that I mentioned. Let's see. Nope, this one. Number 5 on this slide, challenges to open data and how to respond. That should give you some answers.
You want money?
I hear talking, but I'm not sure if there's a question there or.
So it sounds like somebody's unmuted. This is Jason. I'm hoping people can hear me. Can people hear me? I should keep talking. Okay. I just wanted to possibly give you, there's you spent 45 minutes, and what we really asked Steph, as Sarah and I were working through the questions for today, we wanted data advocacy, building community, and really we asked her about the two major, what do you do with external partnerships, and maybe more importantly, how do you tell your story inside of the organization. So did anybody want to follow up with that, with either side of that? We got a good picture, I think, of external partnerships. There seem to be some lingering questions around how do you motivate your peers, your colleagues in the building or in the library? Did anybody want to follow up with that, or just putting that out there?
While I'm waiting for people to ask that question, I'll respond to UC Berkeley's question, if that's all right. What was your experience building trust with researchers? Did you find that some researchers were skeptical that the library had the knowledge, resources to help them? Yes, at the beginning, I think there were, but I think I wouldn't say that's an issue now. It comes from building that relationship and showing that you do have knowledge and expertise and just getting involved constantly, going to the departmental meetings and talking, those coffee conversations. If you ask the right questions, people will know that you have the knowledge. As for the resources, we provided data management consultation services. One thing that we did was we have a data science studio on campus that opened after the data services program started, and we asked for time, 2 hours a week, I think it is, that we were able to be in that space and be available to data science researchers to help them with data management planning consultations, to help them find data resources for their research projects that already existed. And just engaging with the researchers. You've got to get out of the library. You can't sit there inside and wait for people to come to you asking for help. You have to go out and offer it. And after doing that enough, word of mouth, I became one of those librarians that they know and they trusted, and that's where that trust came from. Did that answer it? Okay, Jason, do you want me, I don't see any other follow-up questions coming on the internal and engaging with colleagues.
Yeah, I think that's been great. It's been a wonderful introduction, and Sarah, we know that the group can obviously you've invited us to reach out to you if we have additional questions. We'll link all. Okay, and we'll link all that we can. We'll get the slides up and make any of the other links. We can put those up as resources as well.
Sorry, I just want to say, I would love to hear experiences. If you could tweet me, if you guys are tweeters, or email, I would really love, here's my ask from you, sorry. I would love to hear how you get your colleagues engaged. What have you tried? What was your success? Where did things not work? What did you find worked better than other things? I would really love to hear that, and I would love to share it with other people as well. And now I'll stop talking.
No. You're great.
And we do have a hashtag eResearch Network. It's, that if we want to have a conversation on Twitter where everyone can be involved with Stephanie, we can use that hashtag.
So Steph, you're free to stick around. There's a little over a half hour left of our session today. We're going to talk a little bit more about logistics and the assignment and where we go from here, and a little bit about the next session. Can people hear me? I should keep talking and making sure that people can hear me. Okay, good. Okay. So Steph, feel free to stick around. I know that if you have other obligations or you need to jet out of here, that's just great too. we'll definitely be in touch.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for your
I
time.
will mute myself and hang around. Muted myself too soon, sorry. Hang around in case there are any other questions that come up.
That sounds great. So I don't know how many of you saw, I mean, we started with a little bit of an intro. I do want to just provide a little framework for how these sessions are going to look. They'll be very typical of what we saw today, which is a speaker with a kind of strong prompt, and then we'll work through from that idea. We'll move into ideas around what do we want to discuss and what do our assignments look like. So it typically will be 90 minutes or so. A speaker, you saw the Q&A today, which was really great. Thank you all. Then we'll probably turn closer to discuss what the assignment will look like, or what we call the exercise. And then we'll also leave a little bit of time because we want these discussions to continue. If there are open questions before we close, we'll leave some time for them as well. Okay. Any questions about the logistics? Sarah, did you want to say anything else about that?
I think that covers it.
Okay. She says that probably covers it. I did want to kind of talk a little bit more about what the expectations for the assignment are. That's a great question, Megan and Toby. That's where I'm going to go right now. So what we thought, again, we have a great mix of folks in the cohort, but we also have various levels of people who are at different implementation levels of data management in their institutions. So for instance, we have University of Washington. Steph was there, built a program. They're pretty far along versus some of our other, some people are coming to data management for the first time. I would put Montana State is we're about 2 or 3 years into our program. So we're kind of in the middle. But what we wanted to do with this first assignment was give all people within the cohort chances to kind of dig into areas which you probably have to do anyway. And you'll see this slant with a lot of our assignments where we tried to map them to areas where you're probably going to have to do this kind of work. And so we wanted to allow the EARN to at least give you a running start at a number of those kinds of activities. So for this particular assignment, you have a choice. What we did early on, or what a number of institutions do early on, they kind of frame what data management is for an external audience. And we did a particular type of roadshow. It's just a slide deck. And it doesn't have to be long. The other thing that Sarah and I are feeling about, we don't want you to spend all week on an assignment, but we do want you to kind of, like I said, get a running start at some of these activities. So the roadshow would just be, if you chose that option, it might be good if you're at the early stages of RDM or research data management implementation. And so what you could just set up a slide for an audience defining what data management is, what services the library provides, and we did I'll push the link in a second to the syllabus. We have a couple examples there. For those of us who are a little more further on down the line with RDM, we thought a supplementary or another assignment to follow would be a data management curriculum. And what we thought here was more of a lesson plan for how would you teach data management to an audience. So rather than just a sort of informative introduction to what is data management, how does the library fit into that role, this would be more about addressing, the example we put on the syllabus was addressing a freshman or an undergraduate class and introducing a curriculum to them.
Yeah, and with the lesson plan, it doesn't, we gave you some examples from Data 1 and Mantra and other sort of really complex data management modules. But the lesson plan, I gave an example of a lesson plan for just a quick workshop that I did. And I just had 3 learning outcomes and sort of the details about how each section of the workshop would go. So it doesn't have to be really complex, just sort of your ideas for how a workshop would go.
Megan and Toby, I can put written instructions in an email today, just to give a little more. I mean, obviously we're discussing it here, but I can just provide a little more context. Does that sound okay? Okay. And so I did provide a link to the syllabus. I get that. Yeah, I have too many emails too. Good point. So I'll put it on the syllabus. Just a little description of the assignments themselves. I'm actually going to go to, I'll leave this one up right here. So our contact information. I'm going to also see if, stop sharing and see if I can share my screen. Give me a second. If you all went black, can you see the ClearDLF GitHub account? How's that? Yeah, good. Okay. So what we did is we kind of, like we said, we kind of mapped out these sessions, the different parts of today, and we're hoping that the readings will obviously become a resource. This is going to be a public document, and then the exercises themselves would be part of that. We've linked up a number of documents, noted who our speakers are. So I guess I would call them suggested readings. I'm kind of looking at Sarah across the room. So they'll provide context to a number of the things that Stephanie was alluding to today, but also help you understand how others have written about promotion of data services, which is really relevant to the exercise or the assignment, what we're calling it. I did want to also mention that we're set up for our next session. So the next session will be more focused on the data management planning and funder requirements, and we actually have representatives from NOAA, NSF, and NIH. Sarah and I are talking with JP and Dinah tomorrow to help frame, help them, kind of give them some questions for how to present to us. So that'll be another good one. If you can kind of follow through, you can see we move from data advocacy to data management planning, and then we're going to take a shortcut into side trip into digital scholarship, digital humanities, and data visualization, because we heard loud and clear from this cohort in particular that we wanted to bring that concept into eResearch, into the eResearch network and data management. So we'll talk about that. You can see there's discovery and metadata, data privacy and ethics, and then finally assessment. So not only moving from how do you become or build a community, but then how do you assess the success of that community and the success of your data repository, for instance. So that's kind of a picture of what the rest of these sessions will look like from here through October. I did mention that we're also looking to probably build a little social media chat session around RDM, and I'll provide more details as we might do that 2 or 3 times just to keep us connected. And then, did you want to say anything about the consultations? So there is an overall project that we asked the cohorts to think about. I mentioned it in the initial email, and usually that project is something that, these exercises, again, as Sarah mentioned, are small, and we don't want you to spend too much time on them. We want you to get some momentum for whatever those activities are. But then there's a larger, like if you have a larger problem that you want to discuss and get consult on, that's what, there's another component of the EARN that where we talk with a number of, where we talk with each member of the cohort and try to work through one of those bigger questions. So, for example, Sarah, what was ours when we participated was, oh, I remember. We were just putting up DSpace.
That's right, yeah. That's right, yeah. And so we were looking for advice about how to set it up for data.
So it could be technical, and then we would match you with potential, like there might be other people from former, earlier cohorts of the eResearch network that we would match you with, or we would talk with you depending on where the expertise, what types of questions you had. So I'll kind of draft this up and put it onto the syllabus because I don't think I've itemized the idea of the larger consultation project. So I will draft that and put that in the syllabus as well. So I'm looking at the chat. Were there anything else? Follow-ups to Steph? Any questions about? I mean, are we correct in kind of understanding where people are in the cohort? Like some of us are much further along. Some of us are getting started, and I think that makes for a great mix. Just wondering if there's anything else we want to kind of touch on today.
Jason, this is Deb from Drexel. Can you hear me?
Hi.
I had a couple questions. One is, might it be possible to get a roster of the names of the participants from the different cohorts? We know who the institutions are, but it'd be interesting if we could share if people are, interested in doing that, the 3-person team.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll reach out to Oliver, who is our program coordinator, and ask for.
And if we add it to our GitHub, then if there are any email addresses for people that Oliver doesn't have, you guys can add them yourselves.
And another question I had was, might there be a way to inform us when new things have been added to the syllabus? Because I kind of slipped my mind to go back and sort of recheck closer to the time, and additional readings had been added. So I know it's kind of a work in progress, but I don't know if there's a way that, by a certain date that the syllabus would be sort of frozen or ready, or if you just want us to be going in there periodically and looking.
No, you don't have to do that. We're going to finish this up. We're going to finish this up in the next week, so it'll be. But if I do add changes or if there are changes, you can just make a note to the listserv. Does that work?
I also think the readings are for your information, and so you can read them before or you can read them after. We sort of envision them as helping you finish your exercise.
Okay.
Rather than being something you needed to prepare for this.
Okay, that's fair. And my last question is about the assignments. Are we going to be sharing these out in some way, or is this just really an internal exercise, within our own institution?
Hold on, I'm unmuting. I hope you can hear me. So I think with the number of, in years past, we had, everybody would kind of go through and show what they had done, and that was possible, I think, with the smaller cohorts. So what I think we will do is we will gather them and post them in a public area, whether it's in a public box account or something like that, so people can see them. But we might ask people from maybe 2 or 3 people from the cohort to actually do a demo of what they what they've done, but not necessarily everyone. I think we're still kind of working. The size of this cohort is something we've been just kind of thinking through. So yes, everything will be collected publicly so that people could look at what others have done. But we might ask we'll probably do a quick. We would look at those assignments and then maybe reach out to those folks who we felt like. Would you want to speak to what you were thinking when you built this roadshow in particular, or designed this lesson plan, for example? I just don't think we have time to do all. If we did 20 of us showing each example, I think we'd run out of a chance to see everybody speak.
Peer review with the partner.
Peer review with a partner could work. Are you talking as far as the consultation or the assignments? Assignments. Yeah. It's just by the next webinar is the due date. Actually, we should formalize that. It should be a little before, probably a week before the next, and I'll put that on the syllabus and I'll send it in the email, just so that Sarah and I could look at them before. And I think to UC Berkeley's question, we're hoping to put them probably in the open science. Maybe we'll build a spot over there for our for linking the assignments so people can see them. Yeah, I totally agree. It would be great to see what everybody's doing. Okay. So we'll start to build out that OSF presence. I think that's it for today. We're a little early. A typical session we'd have a little more time, but we would probably draw out a couple of the assignments and talk through them. So that's probably that's where we'd fill in more of the blanks as far as this session goes. I'll finish the syllabus, get a little more of an explanation on the syllabus of what the exercise of what we're looking for in the assignment, and then I'll also post out where you can, the OSF area where we can collect the assignments. Does that sound okay? And then of course this was recorded, so we will also post the link to the recording and also Steph's slides. I see a couple of people are typing. Okay. Did you? I'm going to mute my microphone.